You could be a fan of Beyonce
If
and
a
point out where
Latino
she
told
misses the
you
mark.
that African Americans were the
You could be a
enemies
fan
of
of
peace, order,
Beyonce
and
and
settlement,
point
would
out
you
where she
defend that?
misses the mark. The discourse
If an
regarding
indigenous
the
person,
Buffalo. You could be a fan of Beyonce and point out where she misses the mark. I'm gonna repeat it again. You could be a fan of Beyonce and point out where she misses the mark. The discourse regarding the Buffalo Soldiers and her wearing the t-shirt the last 24 hours has been all over my timeline. We are all aware of Black America's history with the military. If you've been to any museum, any documentary you've seen, or just talk to veterans, you know that there's a very torrid history. We can acknowledge the complexity of it, but we also can't gloss over the fact that they aided settlers in unaliving indigenous people. And you as a fan have no right to silence or speak over Native Americans that do or don't have a problem with it. Because I know not every person is not a monolith in a community. And there's no way to have this kind of conversation online because you have the stand saying, shut up, y'all doing too much. And then you have the people that are overly critical of Beyonce in general saying, oh, you're just giving her a pass because you're a fan of her. I will say this was an oversight with the team in regards to her wearing the shirt because we know our girl loves to research, and her putting it in front and center, I think she saw it as one thing and people are seeing it as another thing, and we can admit that she missed on that front. It won't be addressed directly unless people are loud enough about it, but specifically from the community that it harmed, because we know Beyonce does not care about what the press says, but if it's from directly the community, then she's going to care and she's going to want to fix that.
If a Latino told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? If an indigenous person told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? If an Asian American told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? If a white person told you that African Americans were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement, would you defend that? Because apparently you would. And mind you, this isn't a situation where a Fox News reporter got the facts wrong and, tapped into their misogynoir bag. Like, nah, this is just a situation where Beyonce is wrong for doing this. She's 100% in the wrong for not vetting this and for even showing up, popping out with that shirt on in the first place. And yet, still, excuses, false equivalencies run amok. There's even talk about how Native Americans own slaves. And I'm not denying that some Native Americans own slaves, because that's objectively true. But the way that this talking point is being used, especially in this moment, is so funny to me because it's coming from the same group of people that hated when other races and ethnic groups categorize all Black people as one monolithic group. And the same group of people who hate when that happens are the exact same people categorizing all Native Americans as one monolithic group. Mind you, we're talking about thousands of tribes with their own customs, languages, and ways of thinking. And yet, we're just going to conveniently put them all into one monolithic group to say that they all did this, they were all engaged in this, therefore, Beyonce's actions are excused in full. I also love hearing the excuse that this Buffalo Soldiers t-shirt was taken from a website, written by AI, and Beyonce didn't release the merch. Like, that doesn't make it worse, because you're a Beyonce fan. When have you known Beyonce to half-ass anything? You know this. I know this. Her and her team are well known to vet everything, to go over every single meticulous detail. That's what makes her albums amazing, her art amazing, her music amazing, her stage presence and performances amazing. And yet she let this slide? And then didn't even add in the nuance of the Buffalo Soldiers and how they were enslaved and psychologically set up to fight for the U.S. empire, which makes the whole thing so much more worse and horrible when you really put it into context, when you add in the nuance of white people putting an enslaved, oppressed class against another enslaved, oppressed class, all to benefit white people at the end. But no, accountability must be dodged because Beyonce is dropping a rock album next. So prepare for nothing else to come out of this but excuses, false equivalences, and talking points that just lack nuance entirely.
I love Beyonce down just as much as the next person, y'all. I really do. And as a Black and Native woman, one who is getting her master's in Indigenous law, I believe I'm qualified to speak on this topic, and provide some education. Before I even get into this, I do want to acknowledge that the history of the Buffalo Soldiers very complex, very complicated. This is actually very interesting because I just got done really deep diving into the Civil War era of Indigenous law and federal Indian policy. Basically, Buffalo Soldiers did play a big part in enforcing colonial westward expansion. And while on one hand there was an opportunity for Black Americans to find a little bit more stability by pursuing the military and all this, they were given an opportunity to survive in white supremacist society, but at what cost? Because this came at the direct expense of Indigenous sovereignty and lives. It's just really sick because they were forced to remove Indigenous people off their ancestral lands and force them onto reservations. So in the end, both Black and Native people are really victims of US settler colonialism. So then for Beyonce to go and enforce that Indigenous people are the enemies in westward expansion and US colonialism, like, girl, I thought we were for the people. I thought we were for liberation. And I do think there was an opportunity where it could have been done for her to just, represent the Buffalo Soldiers, because obviously that was the path for Black Americans at the time. But to double down and say Indigenous people were antagonists is really just pitting two people against each other. And I'm also confused because I know Beyonce has like deep roots to New Orleans, Louisiana. I think she had her wedding there or something. And that has a deep, rich history of Indigenous and Black solidarity. So for her to pit these two, peoples of oppression against each other is truly so sad. And I just feel like your fave icon wouldn't do that. Your fave icon who's looking to change the world in a positive light wouldn't put oppressed people against each other. So I don't know why she did that. And I feel like at her level, things are very intentional. So it's just a little bit scary. And, I was a base stan, but I don't know how to feel about this. So if there is anything I can ask, Beyonce, please do better. I do want people to be educated. It's really us against them in this larger battle of oppression and, colonization that's still ongoing. And it looks like Beyonce's just trying to be on the side of the oppressors. And I guess from all this, I would just want to ask Beyonce why? Why promote this message? Why have that writing on your back? And maybe she doesn't care. She's not for the people. Maybe I just need to accept that. Sad. You know what they say. Never meet your idols.